So, the mid-chapter patch notes have arrived, and with them the post-PTB adjustments for the Skull Merchant. And much like the PTB, this is a series of changes that have some good elements amidst a sea of mostly disasters. Skull Merchant on the PTB was almost certainly DBD's worst killer, a newcomer to and sole resident of the F tier. And these changes were designed to make her a little more viable, even though they were still meant to be an overall significant nerf. And if we're talking purely on power level, then yeah, I guess Behaviour did what they wanted to do. These changes are definitely better than she was in the PTB, but a lot weaker than her live state. Congratulations Behaviour, you've turned Skull Merchant into a bottom 3 killer instead of bottom 1. Alright everybody, let's give them a huge round of applause everyone. Good job guys, mission accomplished. But even if we say that nerfing a C tier killer into a D tier one instead of an F tier one is some sort of accomplishment worth celebrating, then most of these changes are still a massive mistake. Some of them make her weaker for no good reason at all, while others only buff her in the least interesting ways possible. Not the kind of changes that will make her feel better to play, just ones that will make her feel worse to play against. And let's not forget that her feeling so bad to go against was the driving force behind these nerfs in the first place. These changes are so comprehensively awful that I'm about to say something that I thought I would never say. I agree with Scott Jund, of all people, about these Skull Merchant changes. Yeah, it's that bad. Like, you know Behaviour is messed up royally when Adriana's strongest soldier and the number 1 Skull Merchant anti are unified in hating what's been done here.
The Skull Merchant. So this is going to be not a good change. This is just bad. Even people that like Skull Merchant are not happy with this. Even Pixel doesn't like this. The funny part is she's still, like, I think weaker than before, but she's still as miserable to go against. So now just no one's happy. The Skull Merchant players aren't happy, and the players going against Skull Merchant aren't happy. Just literally no one's happy. This is just complete failure yet again. So we'll see what they change about her in the next 5 years when they do the third update for her.
Granted, Scott and I don't agree on everything. Scott seems to think that her skill floor is going to stay super low with the return of the haste, which I'm less concerned about because one beam is still a significant restriction, but my concern is more how frustrating the speed differential is to be on the receiving end of. I don't think bad Skull Merchants are going to feel oppressive now like they could do on live sometimes. The bad Skull Merchants are going to try her out, get 4 out of her because they don't know how to manage one beam, and then move on to Chucky or Nemesis or something. The good Merchants though, they'll hit you with a 13% speed difference from the haste and hinder reverts that's just as nasty as it is on live servers, and people are going to get mad they still got smacked down with the speed difference, and before you know it, the 4 people still playing Skull Merchant after the first couple of days are going to be farming bot matches just like a mama used to make. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. So let's go through the changes one at a time to check out the flight recorder of this killer that Behaviour has crashed into a mountainside and see what can be salvaged from the wreckage. As usual, we're going to start by talking about the good parts of these changes, limited as they are. The best bit by far is the partial revert to the hinder values. The 10% hinder on live and the 5% hinder on the PTB having compromised to 8% on the new patch, and this was honestly the bare minimum they could have done. 5% hinder was obviously and clearly a joke. It was so bad it was legitimately worse than Bloodlust. If there's any one change I knew would not make it to live, it was the hinder, so I'm not even going to applaud Behaviour for it because it was a complete no-brainer. Vital targeting processor makes it 11%, which is slightly better than it is on live in the base kit, so that's going to feel great if you can spare the add-on slot. Another change that I like is the increased rotation speed of the solo beam. 95 degrees per second is effectively prototype rotor base kit, and that add-on was fine. It sets your one beam's full speed at one rotation pretty much every 4 seconds. However, with Proto Rotor, the drone rotates at 104.5 degrees per second, which is a significant boost, so Prototype Rotor is going to feel like a great add-on as well. But here's where things start to get bad, and we're going to start out with a simple change. Skull Merchant moves at 4.4 meters per second now with the radar out and when you deploy a drone, which is, No,
God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Skull Merchant 1.0 had a movement penalty with the radar out, and all it did was just make the killer feel like shit to play. You want to check out a survivor's location once you got a hook? Nah, you're Huntress speed now until you put it away. No reason for that, we just sort of felt like it. It makes the killer feel clunky for absolutely no good reason. We tried it, it was lame, why are you bringing it back? What does this change do other than just be annoying to use? Speaking of being annoying though, I want to talk about the return of Skull Merchant's base kit haste, which if you remember I said was one of the good things about the first round of changes that she got. And they brought it back, because of course they did. Rather than being a 3% haste at first that scales up with the more survivors scanned on the radar, the haste is now a flat 5% whenever a freshly placed or rotated drone scans a survivor. On paper this looks alright. After all, it is meant to encourage actively placing or rotating the drones into survivors to scan them quickly, and that's good in theory, but in practice, what's this haste actually going to do to benefit you? Getting the haste when scanning a healthy survivor is going to feel pretty pointless, because what benefit do you get from being 5% faster when your power is going to injure them without you needing to be anywhere near them? It's like giving Artist haste when she hits someone with a crow swarm. It's not a bad thing, but it just doesn't make much sense. It encourages you not to use your power, instead just to M1 people to death with your increased speed, which is weird because the claw trap injury is the entire point of the power. So why are you encouraging us not to do it and instead just play M1 lady with a wrist blade? The only other thing that healthy scan lines giving haste will do to benefit you is to offset the moving at 4.4 with the radar route or on drone deployment, which is so pointless it feels like smashing my ribs with a baseball bat and then offering to pay for half my medical bills. You could have just not hit me with this in the first place and we'd all be happier for it. So the only time the haste will actually feel useful and will impact the outcome of the game will be when chasing an injured survivor, since you'll have to M1 them to get the down. But at that point, what's really changed between the live build of the game and these new changes? You said yourself on the PTB that the difference between the haste and the hinder was overbearing when they were combined, adding up to a 13% difference, which is now the same value of the combined hinder and haste again. So this doesn't even make it feel better to play against because the overbearing speed differential still exists.
So what they did, first up, they immediately brought the haste back, but they brought the haste back in the most uninteresting way. And the reasoning behind it is sort of perplexing to me. So we've reintroduced the haste effect for a short time after a drone is deployed or rotation is swapped. This will reward the killer for using the power actively rather than setting and forgetting and randomly getting haste from survivors across the map. The issue with this is it literally incentivizes the most boring part and the most hated part about Skull Merchant, which is when you're being chased, she just shits out a drone, and then she's going to get haste and you're going to get hindered. That's the part everybody hates. That's even the part that the really good Skull Merchant players hate. It's the low skill floor, you just toss that shit up, not a care in the world. Either the survivor leaves the loop, or you just get haste and they get hindered, which gives you a hit. So that is the thing that we did not want to incentivize, and now because it only happens within 5 seconds of you dropping a drone, that is all it incentivizes now. That is the main thing that you want to do to get that haste. So kind of a weird way to take that, because it basically emphasizes the worst part about having to go against Skull Merchant.
I don't understand this change because I don't get who it's for. People who don't like Skull Merchant because she relies too on status effects will hate this because it's just live Merchant again. And people who like playing her as she is don't benefit either, because the most the haste does for you is either just replicate the live Merchant experience or encourage you to M1 healthy survivors, which you're not supposed to do anyway. It just kind of feels like a bum deal for everyone. If behaviour wanted to actually encourage skillful play and deploying and rotating drones properly in chase, there's a much easier and less parasitic solution that I'll go into later, but before I do, I want to draw your attention to the worst part of these changes. Fast vaulting now makes you immune to being scanned. I won't beat around the bush. This is awful, like actually catastrophically bad. I'm going to show you a fairly common situation that you can get put in to show you what I mean. You're chasing a survivor and they're at, say, 2 lock-on stacks, and they don't want to get injured and claw trapped, so they'll run to a pallet, drop it, and just stand there, knowing the drone can't scan them as long as they stand still there. If it's a strong pallet, you're probably just going to break it while they gain distance, but at shorter tiles like fillers, this creates a bit of a Mexican standoff. If you commit to the direction they're standing in, they're going to have to vault or take an M1, so if you can predict when they're going to vault and rotate your drone or put up a new one so that the beam crosses over the pallet as they vault it, the drone will light them up and scan them. It's how Merchant can get injury at a tile and can do cool things like this, by predicting a survivor taking a vault and positioning the beam accordingly. On the live version of the game, the mind game heavily favours the Skull Merchant to the point that it isn't really a mind game at all. With 2 beams in the base kit haste, it's not a 50-50, it's more like an 85-15 in her favour, and she can force you to keep doing it over and over again until she gets that hit. However, with 1 beam like on the PTB, it's much closer to a 50-50. If she messes up the timing, the 1 beam will take longer to rotate back around and get ready for another go. You'll have to actively manipulate it to get the hit. But when this mid-chapter change hits, the mind game now becomes a 100-0 in favour of the survivor. They can stand still, wait for you to commit to a direction, vault the pallet, and just stand still on the other side while being completely immune to your power the entire time. So if you're the Skull Merchant in this situation and you want to get a hit, what are you going to do? Do you A. wander around the tile trying to rotate your drone or put up a new one, while losing Bloodlust, being 110, and with the survivor literally being invincible to your power, or B. not use your power at all and Bloodlust the survivor to death? Just like on PTB, it's actually disadvantageous to use your power instead of just bloodlusting, and that's really, really shit design. Why did they add the haste bonus to try to encourage the Skull Merchant to use her power skillfully, while at the same time giving survivors a completely consistent and completely brain-dead counter stops you getting any value out of it? It's just insane to me. This also makes a ton of other situations feel really unfair for the killer. If a survivor ran into a tile with a drone in it, they'd often have to make the choice between eating a scan line and gaining distance with a fast vault. But now that you're immune during fast vault, you're rewarded and get to avoid the killer's power for free by just doing the thing you were going to do anyway. Every ranged killer and mid-range owner in the game gets a free hit if the power is used correctly, and can take a whole health state, or at least half of one, if the survivor is animation locked. So what makes Skull Merchant's ability to get 1/3 of the first health state so oppressive that she's the only killer in the game whose power is hard countered by a vault? To be clear, a really good survivor who knows how to release their input minings can do this on live servers anyway, but these changes just mean that Hex Leon's cumsock, who has 20 hours in the game and thinks shift tech is something that you do in typing capital letters without using caps lock, can execute the killer's counterplay for free, by accident, and without anything the Skull Merchant player can do about it. Isn't that just great, guys? Oh, and speaking of setting up drones ahead of time, yeah, behaviour really doesn't want you doing that. The 5% haste bonus only applies to a drone that has been recently rotated or placed, meaning that if a survivor runs into a pre-placed drone and the correct play is not to rotate it, congratulations, no haste for you. This, combined with the fact that stealth mode is just gone now, means that any attempts at playing Skull Merchant as a trap killer are basically dead until the rework, and that was entirely intentional. In the dev note, they described setting up drones ahead of time as traps as setting and forgetting, which is such a rude and dismissive way to write off the entire trap killer playstyle. Would you say that about Trapper or Hag? Are they just set and forget killers too? No, not at all, because you would set up a Trapper or Hag trap with a level of intentionality, with a particular plan in mind for the trap. And the same thing's true for Skull Merchant. I had a whole section in my guide talking about how you can be crafty with drone placements in your setup and trick survivors into walking into being outside of chase, artificially increasing your reach or making your drones harder to disarm. Thanks to behaviour, all that information is almost completely useless now, because of a concerted attempt by the devs to kill the trap killer playstyle stone dead. And that makes me feel terrible, because she's our first trap killer in 6 years. Trap drones weren't overpowered, they were very counterable if the survivors were playing with their monitors on, but people complained too much for no good reason, and stealth mode got shot in the head for it. I'll say it before, and I'll say it again. Just like the vault change, all that gutting the trap killer playstyle does is coddle bad players.
And it seems like they're completely missing the point. If anything, the killer should be rewarded more for setting up an active web and controlling the area where chases go, and not just shitting out a drone immediately. It's like they went the complete opposite wrong direction with how to do it, so.
Where do we go from here? I don't know if behaviour are going to want to touch her again in the bug fix patches before the new chapter lands, but I really hope they do, because this update is mostly a failure. She'll feel worse to play because of the 4.4 stuff and the base kit shift tech. She'll still be a pretty shit killer, even though she won't be like worse than Freddy anymore. And as far as status effects go, she won't really feel better to play against either, so her kill rate might even stay high because players will keep giving up. This is just kind of a disaster in every respect, and that's frustrating because, like in the PTB, they made a couple of good changes that they just covered in a bunch of garbage. If I was in charge of these changes, I'd get rid of all of these. Keep the hinder, keep the rotation speed, and instead of adding the base kit shift tech or the weird movement speed stuff, I'd make one simple change. Reduce the scanline immunity window from 3 seconds to 2.25 seconds. In other words, make the add-on ultrasonic speaker part of her base kit. It's clear that the reason that the haste exists in Skull Merchant's new kit is to encourage the killer to manipulate their drones to scan survivors effectively, which is good. It's something that should be encouraged, but you can't do it effectively without ultrasonic speaker. Ultrasonic means that if a survivor gets scanned by a drone and you're on the ball with your rotations, you can spin the beam back into them just as the immunity window between scans passes, but before they leave the range, to give them 2 scans for the price of 1. It requires pretty good timing to get it right, but it gives the killer a lot more depth and room for skill expression, because you have to learn the timing and how fast the drone goes so that you can catch him at the end of the timing. It should be clear now that haste is a really shitty reward because it either doesn't help you or is a ball ache to go against, so why not give us something we can actually use to make that playstyle work for us? Like, I don't know, a second add-on slot? If radar movement speed goes back to 4.6, which it absolutely should, the haste doesn't do anything other than be annoying. An ultrasonic based kit would be a much better way to give merchant players what they want, while still encouraging them to use the power in a skill expressive way. If you don't want to give her that, there's so much more you could do to encourage precise laser tagging and precision rotation. You could increase the beam's range, you could speed up the drone deployment time to make laser tagging more consistent, you could make the hinder apply on claw trap attachment as well as on subsequent scans. There's all sorts you could do, but ultrasonic based kit would be the best. So yeah, keep the changes to the hinder and rotation speed, throw away the rest, and give her base kit ultrasonic speaker with a change to the add-on. Then we have a good set of changes. Yeah, like that's ever going to happen. And this brings me to the scariest part of the patch notes, and that's these little words right here. Because after this hatchet job of changes, I don't trust behaviour to get this rework right. If you're a dev watching this, please, I am begging you, let me into the designer's room for the Skull Merchant 3.0 rework. I'm begging, I'll sign an NDA, I'll do whatever you want me to do, just let me in. Because it's irrefutably clear now that you just don't understand this killer. You don't get what makes her power work properly, what makes her fun or unfun, what makes her strong or weak. So why should I trust you to fix her? Why would any Skull Merchant fan, hell, why would any Dead by Daylight player trust you to fix her after this hatchet job? After the absolute dog's breakfast you made of the Trickster rework or the Twins PTB rework that came before? And not to toot my own horn or anything, but I think I know this killer pretty damn well. I've been yapping about her since she came out, I spent ages labbing stuff in custom matches to figure out what she could do, and made a 90-minute guide to share what I learned with the community. I've put a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of love into this killer, and reading these changes now, I've never felt more unheard. I've never felt more useless. There's nothing more I can do except ask that you let me in. Ask to have my confidence restored because I'm just tired, man. I'm so tired of this. So to round off, there's one simple question that I think still needs answering. After all these changes, will I still be playing her? I'll be honest, I don't know. It's too early to say for sure. The make or break for me will be whether the fast vault change and the 4.4 change will drive me insane over the next year while I wait for the rework. Everything else I'm pretty sure I can make work, especially with the hinder and rotation speed pumped up a touch, but between the fact that the trap drones just don't exist anymore, movement speed down to 4.4 for seemingly no reason, and the fact she's gotten so much easier to counter with the fast vault thing on top of being harder to play and weaker than she already was, like that's a lot to ask. But it wouldn't be a lot if behaviour hadn't done so much damage with these changes. Maybe they'll sort her out in patches to come before the rework hits, but if they don't, well, I guess I'll see you in a year.